Hello, I'm Michael Asbury, Deputy Director of the Research Centre for Transnational Arts, Identity and Nation, TrAIN for short. And I'd like to welcome everyone to another TrAIN lecture, one of our open series, where we invite artists, curators, historians, philosophers, political activists, and more generally, engaged social observers to discuss their work, ideas, and projects. TrAIN is based at Chelsea College of Arts, but is constituted by members and associate members from across the University of the Arts London and beyond. TrAIN is a transdisciplinary centre formed by scholars working across the porous borders between the post-colonial and the decolonial, the historical and the contemporary, the poetic and the political. And with this very much in mind, the poetic and the political, it is my immense pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mohamed Somji, who I met while he was working as one of the curators for the photography biennial in the Netherlands, Breda Foto. Mohamed is a photographer, a curator, a writer, and is based between the UK and the United Arab Emirates. He is an architectural and documentary photographer, and his photography is located and it probes schisms in contemporary art, contemporary life, challenging the status quo with sensitive, critical commentary on politics and representation. Mohamed is the director of the Go Photo Plus, GPP, a Dubai-based gallery and community organization cultivating visual practices in photography in the UAE and across the wider region since 2004. As part of the GPP's commitment to developing visual and critical literacy, the organization engages the community with regular educational and art programming, and for a number of years has hosted an annual photography festival that draws international attendance and showcases the world's preeminent talent in photography. Mohamed is a co-curator of the, as I mentioned, the biennial Breda Foto in the Netherlands, and has served as a jury member for various visual arts initiatives, notably the prestigious Arab documentary photography program. He is the owner and founder of Seeing Things, a photo and video production studio, empowering a team of talented in-house artists who work primarily on art and cultural and culture projects. Mohamed's lecture today is entitled Permission to Narrate, and it is inspired by Edward Said's call for narrative justice. The lecture will highlight work from Palestinian photographers who use diverse approaches and media to document the occupation, apartheid, and genocide in Gaza and beyond. By reclaiming the power to tell their stories, these artists challenge dominant narratives, and this is Mohamed's statement in the blurb. Challenges dominant narratives and asserts the right to self-representation. Through their powerful and varied visual testimony, they bear witness to ongoing atrocities, creating an enduring record that serves as both evidence and demand for justice. So without further ado, Mohamed, welcome, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I'm really looking forward to your lecture. The lecture will take about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that, and then we will open to questions. So while Mohamed is speaking, please feel free to add your questions and comments in the Q&A box, which you see at the bottom of your window. So thanks very much, Mohamed. It's all yours, the floor.
Thank you very much. Is my screen okay now? Can you see the...
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael, Melanie, and Paul, and thank you to TrAIN for inviting me and for hosting, and thank you for all the good work that you do. I think it's very important, the work that you do, and especially as the times that we live in have proved, kind of questioning everything and kind of looking at decolonial practices. It's very, very important. So thank you for having me. So yeah, let me get started by telling you a little bit about Gulf Photo Plus, the organization that's based in Dubai. And even though we're based in Dubai, our kind of footprint extends beyond Dubai to include really the Swana region. And we've been around for over 15 years. And it was when I made the transition from the corporate world to documentary photography, I found that there really were no spaces that would encourage long form or documentary work. And that really is the origin of Gulf Photo Plus. And in a place like Dubai, there really is no public art funding. And so we operate as a commercial concern and sustain ourselves as a business by offering, fine art printing services and educational services, hosting photography workshops that then allow us to use the income from those sources to have an arts program that includes, exhibitions, talks, events. And we get invited by organizations, both private and public, in the region to curate photography initiatives across the Swana region. And through that work, I have also in the last decade have been doing a lot of curatorial assignments for either at different festivals or at organizations. So that really is what we do at Gulf Photo Plus. And I think the exhibitions part is something that we're really proud of because, again, in a place like Dubai, we are always trying to, show work that we find interesting, that is socio-politically provocative, that kind of helps make sense of the issues that we are facing. This is an exhibition we did in 2020 called All That I Want Is Life, which featured photographers from Algeria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Sudan, looking at the kind of protest movements in those countries at the time. This is a exhibition that I will talk about, the work that I will talk about in detail coming up. But this is an exhibition we did with Tanya Habjuka called The Sacred Space Oddity, showing work from Palestine in 2021. This is an exhibition we did called Swallow This, about Arab women and body politics, a very important exhibition for us. It showed work by Reem Falaknaz and Laura Shaheen, who examined the pervasive pathologization of women's bodies, where the politically absurd, visually surreal, and humor intersect. And drawing on the collective experiences of womanhood, Shaheen and Falaknaz became subjects in their own work, blurring the lines between observer and participant. We also then produced a catalog because we thought this work was important and needed a life beyond the exhibition. This is an installation view. And so at Gulf Photo Plus, we're kind of in this unique space of being a public art space, but that's totally self-funded. And that kind of gives us the liberty to show work that we believe in and we believe, that we'd like to platform. And so our mission extends to being, really a hub of support and resource for both young, aspiring and established photographers in the region. And as the curator, I, had the immense privilege of being able to bring some of this work within the region, but also outside the region. And, and my background is not from academia, but rather one of being an artist, photographer, and then curator, over the last 2 decades. So it's really grounded more in the art and cultural space. And so tonight I'll be sharing, my experience of photography from Palestine that we've programmed either through exhibitions or talks or other projects. In the last, we've been working on Palestine or showcasing work from Palestine for many years, but obviously since 2021, when the Sheikh Jarrah episode happened, and then since the genocide started in October 7th, it has been, since 1948, to be fair. We've been kind of working on highlighting these issues, highlighting photographers from Palestine in the UAE, but also in the UK. So that is from the University of Greenwich, where we had hosted an event called Slide Fest Palestine, where we had 5 presenters from Palestine presenting their work. And on the right, you see a talk that we had a couple of months ago in London, full house conversation with Sakir Kader, whose work I will share tonight. And then we have a couple of other events that are coming up, which I'll tell you about at the end. So if you're in the UK, please join us. So yeah, as Michael mentioned, the title of this talk very much informs the work that I'm going to show today. Edward Said's essay "Permission to Narrate" is a very good place to start when thinking about kind of the visual narratives around Palestine. This is an essay that was published on the 16th of February 1984 in the London Review of Books, and it's still available online, and which is a good cue to let you know that I will share a document with all of you on the chat box at the end of the presentation with links to this article, for example, or to some of the other work and the photographers' websites that I'm going to share, and some media articles that I'm going to refer to. So, this essay was very important, a critique of how Palestinian voices have been systematically silenced in Western media and Western political discourse. And written in the aftermath of Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon and the Sabra and Shatila massacres, the essay examines the mechanisms by which the Palestinian narrative has been suppressed and distorted. And a key kind of thrust of his essay is that this disciplinary communications apparatus exists in the West, both for overlooking most of the basic things that might present Israel in a bad light, and then punishing those who try to tell the truth. This is an excerpt from the from the piece. And really, this essay, if you read it now, you'll kind of be amazed at how timeless it is, and it's something that I think came up again since the genocide started. And the phrase "permission to narrate" has entered both academic and activist lexicons as a powerful concept denoting the struggle for marginalized communities, even outside of Palestine. I've seen it used in other contexts to assert their narratives, and really kind of talks about representation, media bias, and the politics of storytelling. And we know that Palestinian voices have been suppressed. This is a really interesting piece of research that was done by Maha Nassar, where she examined thousands of articles published from 1970 to 2020. I think it was 2019, actually, sorry, in the New York Times, Washington Post, The Nation, and the New Republic. And even The Nation, for example, as you can see, has only devoted 10% of its authors writing about Palestine. And the rest have been non-Palestinians. And then the New Republic shamefully has had 0 Palestinian voices in their opinion pieces. The Washington Post 1%, and the New York Times 1.8%. And the New York Times, I should remind you that one of their main contributing writers, Isabel Kirshner, based in Jerusalem, lives in the house of a Palestinian who was displaced, called Ghada Karmi, who doesn't live too far from me here in London. So, and her son served in the IDF. So, you could see the kind of media bias that is so, enshrined in the media and the kind of newsmaking that happens. This is another example of how since October 8th to 5th of November 2023, Israelis were mentioned in Western media, over 90,000 times versus just under 20,000 times, even though the death toll and the kind of destruction was very much converse to what these stats show. We also know that Meta and other platforms on social media have been censoring and suppressing voices. And, even yesterday when I posted about this talk on my Instagram, I had to remind myself to spell genocide differently using an O, 0 instead of O, because these are shadow banned. And we've seen this, and my own Instagram story content, since I've been talking so much about Palestine, has only kind of goes out to 300-400 people when it used to go out to 1,000 people. So yeah, we are seeing we're seeing this kind of in real time, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. So again, just to kind of reiterate, permission to narrate's kind of main thrusts are really 3 things. Palestinians are denied the right to tell their own story, media and intellectual complicity, censorship and suppression, and narrative empowerment. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. But it's really Edward Said's astute analysis is still very relevant today, in that even when atrocities are reported, they're often stripped of context or political meaning, preventing a genuine understanding of the Palestinian plight. And, it has really come as a shock to me, having moved to the UK, to kind of see the ignorance around the issue. And this is not just your average Joe. I remember hearing from a photographer in Palestine who was contacted by The Economist to get some leads for Palestinian photographers to do work, because they couldn't get the Israeli photographers out to the West Bank. So, this photographer friend connected them to somebody, and then she got an angry message saying, "How could you have connected me to this photographer? Because she's saying that she can't go to the West Bank. Like, why can't she go to the West Bank? Because she's and she's based in Gaza." And like this, from the photo editor of The Economist, which is has shown itself to be horrible, is kind of a case in point. And Palestinians are denied the right to tell their own story or tell it in their own terms. And when they are, they're branded as terrorists or rejectionists, while framing Israelis as the democratic and civilizing force. And one of the things that Ed Said says in his piece is to kind of really try and resist this by having more Palestinian voices platformed. And that's what we're going to focus in this lecture today, of how Palestinians are using photography and other lens-based media to share their experiences and document their stories. And again, I'm going to just reiterate that this is just a sampling of work. There are a lot of other photographers, and I'll be sharing just a sampling of them. And so yeah, so starting way back in the mid to late 1800s, photography in Palestine was done by mainly Orientalist figures like Bonfils or a few other English photographers. And even at that time, the land was photographed as being timeless, biblical, an empty, a holy land waiting for divine return. And these photos have supported Zionist settler narratives by framing Palestine as a land without a people. And you could see, there were shepherds without fields, or, desert landscapes evoking Exodus or the Nativity, exotic street life in Jerusalem. And we've seen that not just in Palestine, of course, but all over the East and in Africa, North Africa. So yeah, I think a good place to start by looking at photography, contemporary photography in Palestine, is this wonderful photo book. I think it was really ahead of its time when it was published in '86. It's called After the Last Sky, and it's surprisingly still available on eBay, but also as a new book. I think the last publication was in '99, but it's a fantastic book where even at that time it was genre bending, in that it was a photo book with a lot of text, and I'll give you examples. But it was written by Edward Said and accompanied by photographs by a Swiss documentary photographer called John Moore, who was known for his work with the displaced and stateless. And this book really blends powerful visual storytelling with personal and political reflection, offering one of the most intimate and nuanced portraits of the Palestinian condition ever published, at least up to that point. And the title of the book, After the Last Sky, is based on one of Edward Said's good friends, Mahmoud Darwish's poems, which read, or the excerpt of which read, "Where should we go after the last frontiers? Where should the birds fly after the last sky?" And I think what's really interesting about this book is that it, the essays are personal, because it talks about, Edward Said talks about his own life and kind of his own story, but also deeply political, embodying what he calls a contrapuntal structure holding multiple and conflicting realities in tension. He says at one point, "We are the non-people of history. We do not even have the permission to narrate," which is a reference to the piece that he did 2 years before this book came out. So yeah, this book was really groundbreaking for its time in how it blurred the lines between essay, memoir, and photography. And while photo books with accompanying text were not really new in '86, I think what set it different was both the tone, the structure, and the intent and how deeply political it was. And I'm surprised at how less this book is referred to, as a kind of important milestone in photo book publishing. So if you can get your hands on it, and I think if you were to Google this book and kind of typed PDF after, you may find references of it. But yeah, definitely get a hold of the book. It's available in libraries as well. It's a really fascinating book. And you could see they're always presented with texts from Edward Said. And up to this point, there really was, weren't instances of seeing representations of daily life by Palestinians, that you would see in the West. And Moore's images aren't, they don't aim to sensationalize. He documents the everyday, the intimate, the mundane moments of Palestinian life: children playing, women tending homes, men gathered in conversation. And Said doesn't write as a commentator so much. Rather, he's in dialogue with these pictures, questioning what is being shown and what also is not shown, and how Palestinians are seen by others versus how they see themselves. Yeah, and again, try and get a copy of this. But what was really interesting for me when I was reading the foreword of this book was when Edward Said was talking about how this book was commissioned as part of his assignment when he was serving as a consultant to the United Nations for its international conference on the question of Palestine. He had suggested that these photographs that John Moore had taken to be exhibited at the conference site of this question of Palestine in Geneva. And he was told that he could present the photographs, and that they were indeed wonderful, but they could not be any writing that could be displayed with them, no legends, no explanations. And I think that that's something, as a curator and hosting exhibitions around Palestine in our gallery and elsewhere, context is very, very important, and especially around Palestine. So it's very important when we are showing work that we make space for captions, for context, including maps and testimonies and other accompanying literature that goes with them, because we have been, or Palestinians have been stripped of context, and it's really important that context is always mentioned. So again, I want to reiterate at this stage that I'm not an expert in Palestinian photography. I've worked with many photographers, especially, younger photographers, in helping to get their work out. And the photographers' work that I'm sharing is merely a very small sample of the many, many photographers who have done, are doing, and will continue to do very interesting and important work. We also need to remember that, those that work around Palestine is also determined, or what gets seen and what gets published, what gets exhibited, is shaped by power structures far beyond the control of photographers themselves. And at GPP and the work that I'm doing here in London, we're also trying to platform and support photographers, first and foremost those who are in Palestine, and in the last couple of years, especially those who are in Gaza, and then the West Bank, and next come the Palestinian photographers who are in the diaspora, who sometimes have access that many photographers in Palestine themselves don't. And then finally, allies and other artists who are not Palestinian or not Arab, who are using their privilege to go against the status quo and be accurate and faithful to the realities on the ground. So yeah, let's start with Taysir Batnaji. Taysir Batnaji is a Palestinian photographer from Gaza, but has been living in France, I think, for the last decade. He's a visual artist whose work spans both photography, video, and also installations and drawing. He works with themes of memory, loss, exile, and fragmentation, and his practice is very much shaped by the dichotomy of having been born and raised in Gaza and then being in France. And I think you can't really talk about contemporary photography in Palestine without mentioning Taysir's work, and he's probably the most widely shown Palestinian photographer in the international circuit, if you like. And this work that he did from 2006, I think, is really, really interesting. It's work from Gaza, and it's a series of photographic portraits that were made in the shops, cafes, factories, and other workplaces in 2005 and 2006. And they focus on framed portraits of the masters of the house. And masters probably is a word that he uses, but I think the kind of patriarch of the house, if you like, the late founder or the present boss or the present owner. And usually these photographs hang behind a counter, conspicuously sitting on a shelf or hiding amidst a jumble of stuff for sale. And as he says, they're unconscious compositions arranged by the owners. And I think this work has been interesting for me, especially in the last couple of years, because we have been hearing a lot of commentary about, women and children, and Maya Makdashi, a writer and scholar, has written about this idea of, the focus on, women and children, almost demonize. I mean, not almost. It demonizes the men of Palestine. And this kind of massifying of women and children into an undistinguishable group brought together by gender and sex and the reproduction of the male Palestinian body is always dangerous. And the status of male Palestinians, and of course we have to remember that the Israelis designate that boys aged 15 and up, and sometimes boys as young as 13 count as men. And that this kind of framing by Israel is very sus and circumspect. And the emphasis on the killing of women and children in especially in our media here in the West excludes Palestinian boys and men and further normalizes and erases the structures and successes of Israeli settler colonialism. Civilians and non-combatants are chosen, men are always suspicious, possibility for violence encased in human flesh, and the individual and personal extinguishing of female lives and lives of children is massified and spoken of in statistics. So at first glance, these photographs, may look like simple photographs of placing a portrait of a father in a shop, but Taysir invites us to look deeper. In many of these images, we see sons or relatives who inherited a small business, maybe a barber shop, maybe a tailor stall, maybe a corner store, and have placed a photograph of the father, the original owner, somewhere inside the shop. And these images serve many purposes, a personal tribute, a way to honor the man who built the space, but also reflect something much broader, the idea that the father, even after their death, still occupies the space through image, and his presence lingers. It speaks to legacy, to memory, and to how power and identity are passed down, not just through names or actions, but through quiet gestures like this. And this space for Batniji also between presence and absence, memory and reality, private and public, is what he's always kind of interrogating. And his work lives in this in-between, this reflecting on loss, history, and the quiet traces that people leave behind. And it's quite fitting that one of his later projects that was made in 2016 and 17, which was recently published last year, actually, is called Disruptions, where he again investigates this idea of the conversations that he would have with family in back in Gaza, and so he would record these screenshots of these conversations again, looking at this idea of fragmentation and the loss of memory, kind of echoing what he was facing, being away from the family, but also of the family back in Gaza. So this is an interesting body of work as well. I just thought I would mention that as we were talking about Taysir. And then Taysir's niece, Rihaf Batniji, has a project called On October 6th, which we've shared before at a slide fest. And this is a project that she photographed. Some of these photographs are actually literally taken on October 6th, but some have been taken just before. And it's, Rihaf is somebody who lived through 4 months of the genocide before being evacuated. Thankfully, she had an invitation for a residency in France, and so managed to evacuate through Cairo, through Egypt, and is now in France. She made this series of photographs capturing the sea street, Shar al-Bahr, which is a street in Gaza, suspended in a moment of upheaval, a day etched into collective memory. She says, as time moves on, these photographs hold it still, reflecting a sense of stasis amidst chaos. The sea is something that Rihaf has focused on a lot. She has a previous project about fishermen and the sea, and this is something that she was really struck by. Ever present through Gaza's history appears as more than just a backdrop. For over 25 years, the sea has been a witness to both joy, grief, solitude, and solidarity. Once a symbol of freedom, it now echoes confinement, yet continues to stir hope and new beginnings. And these images speak to resilience. Each frame becomes a quiet act of navigation, tracing a path forward through loss, with the sea as both the mirror and the guide. And this is really interesting work. She has she's been kind of working with this archive that she has. And so yeah, do check her out. Like I said, I'll be sharing their Instagram accounts or websites if they have in a document at the end. That brings me to this really important body of work by Tanya Havjuka. Tanya is a Jordanian, Circassian, Texan photographer who has spent the majority of her life in Palestine with two children who are Palestinian through their father. This is a project that was created between 2009 and 2014. And I think it was really an important body of work at that time because of the way she, pointed her camera towards everyday moments of joy, humor, and intimacy amongst Palestinians living under Israeli occupation. And I think in these works, they don't ignore the occupation. In fact, they frame most of the scenes, but the work resists the idea that Palestinian life is defined only by suffering. Because, we saw up to that point, in the 90s, when the intifadas happened, that photographs of Palestinians were very reductive in that they would focus on the kind of stone thrower images or kind of violence or, victimization. And so Tanya kind of flips that to show, laughter, love, pleasure as acts of defiance. She reminds us that pleasure in Palestine is not frivolous, it is political. To live, to enjoy, to dream, these are radical acts under a system designed to dehumanize. Laleh Khalili, a renowned scholar who some of you may know, who is at the University of Exeter, was Tanya's professor and wrote the foreword. And I love what she wrote here. She said, "We also need imagery that captures the poetry of everyday life and not only the prose of strife. We need the fleeting wash of pleasure to blur our memories in the interstices of devastation, ruination, and grief. We need to remember people embodied in their flesh and not just reflected through the lens of news or prejudice or stereotype." And I think what this work does is to challenge the notion that Palestinians are first and foremost victims. It brings together the indisputable condition of their lives, occupation, violence, surveillance, and shows us that even within the confines of a normalized atrocity, the spirit effervesces. It's an insistence on living amidst the war. This is one of my favorite images from her series, which is of a smoker catching a break after passing through the Kalandia checkpoint with his sheep during Eid time in the front seat and against the backdrop of the wall. And I think this image, has so many layers because you have the absurdity of the sheep in the car, bathed by the kind of light from the car. But then you also, if you look behind, you see the image of Marwan Barghouti, a political prisoner who was arrested in 2002 and sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences. And so you have this juxtaposition of like detention against respite, against this little moment of respite. And so I think it's quite powerful. This work was made into a book and won some awards. And I always tell Tanya how important this work is. for the time. And Palestine's great poet Mahmoud Darwish has a wonderful prose poem where he acclaims the morning coffee, and he writes, "I want the aroma of coffee. I need 5 minutes. I want a 5-minute truce for the sake of coffee. I have no personal wish other than to make a cup of coffee. And with this madness, I define my task and my aim." And I think that, that really is evident in Tanya's work. And then she takes it a step further with her project that she is still working on called the Sacred Space Oddity. And we showed this at Gulf Photo Plus in 2021. That's the image that you saw. And this was work between, this is a project where, pleasure gives way to paradox and the sacred becomes strange. Faith becomes contested terrain. This is no longer about finding normality in occupation, but about witnessing how even worship becomes absurd when filtered through power. I'll leave you to read this caption, and it'll give you a sense of the work that she's done. So I think what she's doing here that is moving forward from her occupied pleasures work is she's trying to really create these lyrical compositions in her work where she is where she's making these, very kind of surreal photographs. And I think given that she has an American passport, she was able to have much more access compared to, let's say, a Palestinian photographer living in the West Bank. And this is why that she's been able to kind of photograph the settler community or photograph Israelis. And what she's been very clear with, and it's something that we have also been doing, is to have these elaborate captions that explains the context around the work, and it's important that these are kind of placed alongside the photographs when they're displayed. And this is an example of a photograph of a rock holding the blood of Mahmoud Odeh, a 47-year-old Palestinian farmer and father of 10, killed on his land by hiking Israeli settlers who claimed that he had threatened them. And so, media narratives tend to simplify reducing complex lives into slogans, but this project resists that, and it moves closer to the ground, focusing on intimate hopes, fears, and contradictions that shape life in Palestine. And I think, other than her access of kind of photographing the other side, if you like, her work also blends realism with surrealism, drawing on a diverse cast of characters who help co-author the images through their presence, stories, and perceptions. And she very much collaborates with the people that she photographs. And the goal is to challenge the myths that we tell, not just about the other, but also about ourselves. So ultimately, this work, which is titled The Sacred Space Oddity, and also if you're looking for it online, it may be called Birds Unaccustomed to Gravity, which I also think is a fantastic title. It's a more immersive and multi-layered way of seeing and unseeing the landscapes, both physical and emotional, of this deeply contested space. And this is a still or an installation view from an exhibition at Gulf Photo Plus, and you can see that unlike other captions that you would see at other exhibitions, these are very detailed captions that mirror the few pictures that you saw before. And again, just a reminder that a lot of these pictures that I'm showing are again just a very small sample of a much bigger project. I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of the different works that are being made. So please, take time to look at their websites and have a look at the work. Next, I'll move on to Ma'an Hamad. He has a project called Landing. And Landing takes a collaborative look at the purposeful escape that skateboarding provides to a handful of Palestinian skaters, including Iman himself, who is a skater. And it's a radical form of resistance to a headspace of violence situated in the mundane and explicit layers of Israeli domination in Palestine. And it's woven throughout. The work also uses his own family's experience of displacement. His family left for the US, so he looks at diaspora and partial return. So he brought his skateboard with him to Palestine in 2014 when he moved back after living in the US for 19 years. And he knew that he would be a stranger, but he needed the kid in him to remind himself that, that he wanted to try and find home. And what's really interesting about Man's project is that this is very much a collaboration with the skateboarding community, and the presentation of this work, whether it's in the book that he has just launched called Landing by Huawa Publishing, I'll give you more details about that towards the end, is also a very kind of contemporary approach to photography that really appeals to the younger generation. And when we showed it at our gallery, we made sure that the kind of exhibition design was, very much, made sure that kind of took into account how skateboarders and how skateboarding is also used as a form of resistance against authority and how that was presented. And that's also something to kind of take note that the photographers in Palestine are not just thinking about the work that they're making, but also how it's being disseminated and presented. So his work includes poems or really interesting literative text. In the work, and this is also something that we in the exhibition made sure to kind of have text to provide context. He has an interview with his father. It's a beautiful video that he has, and these are quite challenging interviews as well, because he's interrogating their kind of displacement and having left Palestine to go to the States, and how that has been. And he also includes screenshots of conversations within the community, and that really provides a lot of kind of color to the work, and gives it a lot of weight and depth. And then this is a project that we will be showing in Birmingham next month, or sorry, in early June. It's called Amira's Castle. So this is the same artist, Ma'an, who is moved on, and the current project that he's working on is called Amira's Castle. And he's actually going back a bit in time, and I think this is really interesting, and I'm really keen to see how this project unfolds. But in this project, he's exploring the lives of his grandparents, Amira and Muhammad, who through exile and return embody the fractured aspirations of Palestinian freedom, and through his grandmother's daily practices on the land that they reclaimed, and a dialogue with his grandfather's revolutionary past, preserved in a vast archive, this project is seeking to understand how the hopes and sacrifices that they carried can shape a vision for Palestinian freedom today. And this is a photo of his grandfather, top left, fighting with the Arab Liberation Army in Tulkarem in Palestine during his last year at the Kaduri Agricultural School in Palestine. And this is an image that some of you may have seen of his grandmother tending to a watermelon plant that sprouted once she had composted the seeds from a shell of a previous melon. I'll tell you about this print. It's available for sale, and it will support Maan, so consider supporting his project. And that's his grandmother, Amira. And next, I'm going to move to Sakir Kader, who is a Palestinian Dutch photographer. And he was inspired to pick up the camera upon the death of his cousin by the Israeli occupation forces. And since then, he's been documenting injustices and life-loving defiance in Jenin and Nablus. And the title of this work is "I Have No More Earth to Lose." And this is inspired by a poem by Mahmoud Darwish that says, he says, "On the verge of death, I have no more earth to lose. Free am I, close to my ultimate freedom. I hold my fortune in my own hands. In a few moments, I will begin my life." And with the people of Jenin and Nablus, Kader explores the complex ways resistance counters occupation and thrives in devotion to land and to life. Early encounters with repression, trauma, and hardship necessitate resilience And, and that's something that you see from children who grow up living in these refugee camps in Jenin and Nablus, which themselves are places of displacement from Palestine during the Nakba. And so he has, a beautiful body of work from these two cities that capture not just the kind of, resistance fighters, but also commitment to the land found in the unshakable determination of the beekeeper's dedication to his craft. It is the capacity to interweave childhood, family, mourning, violence, play, and loss with an unyielding spirit of defiance, even when born into displacement. And he has these photos again of defiance, through humor. That punctuate this work and shape the kind of narrative around the work. And in Arabic, shaheed, the word for martyr, which often upsets a lot of people in the West, means both sacrifice and witness. And his background and Sakir's background and open approach grant him intimate access to Palestinian civilians and fighters. He bears witness to those who give up everything to sustain decades of resistance and those who persist with remarkable tenacity in building lives despite isolation from the freedom of their own lands. And you can see here the different work. And again, a lot of this work can be seen on his website. And even Sakir, like Ma'an, uses disposable cameras that he gives to the people in Jenin and Nablus, and often kids, to document their own kind of lives. And next up is work by Samar Hasboun. Samar is based in Bethlehem, and she did this project in the late 2010s, so I think 2017 to 2019. Samar is a Palestinian photographer based in Bethlehem whose work often gives voice to those living in the margins, whether socially, politically, or geographically. Her series, Errant Doves, is a brave, intimate, and necessary exploration of queer Palestinian lives. When she made this work, it really was to bring us face to face with individuals from Palestine's queer community, many of whom live in fear of rejection, violence, and invisibility, not only from society, but sometimes from their own families or political structures. And some of the subjects live in the West Bank and others in exile. Many had to flee to places like Haifa, Amman, or even the West in search of safety. And this is work that was done just before and during the pandemic. So sorry, I stand corrected. It was work that started before the pandemic, but it continued into the pandemic. And Errant Doves speaks to this, the title speaks to the search for belonging, for peace, for flight. And she uses a very poetic portrait-based approach to center dignity and complexity. And her images resist sensationalizing the queer community and rather hold space for tenderness, defiance, vulnerability, and grace, qualities often denied to queer Palestinians in media narratives. At its heart, this project is not just a photographic series or a portrait series. It's a rare and vital act of listening, of visibility, and of love. Okay, I'm going to move to Gaza, and even as this genocide is happening, there's a young, creative artist who has a background in graphic design called Sama Ahmad, and she produced this work on an iPad, since the genocide began. And this is a body of work that really is very piercing in its nature, both for its need to be there, but also the resilience of somebody who is kind of living through this, being able to muster up the resolve and energy to use an iPad while bombs are going around her to produce this work on an old iPad. And this is work by Sama Ahmad that, excuse me, Sama portrays the resilience of Gaza's people as they fight for sustenance. And despite constant displacement, bombardment, and the cutting off of food and aid, the people of Gaza show remarkable resourcefulness and a fierce will to live. So what she's done is to basically collate recipes and techniques that people have been using during the genocide to feed themselves. And using a collage, these images capture makeshift ovens, inventive cooking methods, and communal meal preparations. Her handwritten notes add a personal touch, highlighting the resilience and determination of a community under siege. And this is a really, really tough PDF to go through. When I was going through it, just to kind of see the bare kind of scant resources that they've been dealing with, and of course, when she produced this, a lot of this was in 2024, and as you may all know, that Israel has been cutting off food and aid in the last, I think, month, and Sama has been telling me over WhatsApp voice notes of how difficult it is for them to have any clean water or flour, and so they've been really struggling in the last few weeks. And I think this is a body of work that really showcases the spirit of Gaza's unyielding defiance through their very creative use of scarce resources. And these acts of cooking and sharing meals become acts of resistance, underscoring that no matter the aggression that they face, their spirit remains unbroken. And there are other photographers in Gaza today who are, who we speak to often, and it is really difficult to kind of, hear from them, and the kind of post-traumatic or ongoing traumatic, that they face. Ali Jadallah, who remarkably keeps making images, having lost a lot of members of his family, having not been able to reunite with his mother, who is in Egypt, making work like this on a daily basis, submitting for wires. And then you have, even amidst this is an image that was made 6 days ago that Suhail Nasser in Gaza posted. And again, these kind of acts of defiance that seep through what is a horrible, horrible experience from them. And then, of course, these photographers have been killed in the last couple of weeks, Fatima Hassouna and Hassam Shabat. And, it's important to recognize their work. And if you look at Fatima's, some of her images that she had taken while she was still alive, again, are very kind of unwavering and beautiful, and kind of shows their lust for life, and that they have to, literally die to exist. And that brings me to the kind of last project that I'll share tonight. And this Permission to Narrate was also the name of an event that we hosted at Gulf Photo Plus on October 18th, 2023. And that night we shared work by Majd Arandas, who was a photographer that we kept in touch with, and I talked to almost on a daily basis since October 7th. And he was somebody that I got to know a few years before that, when he had sent me this photo of his iftar, because I was hosting this Instagram feed called Iftar Journals, where I would ask people from around the world to share their iftars. And Rita, a common dear friend, suggested that Majd share his iftar photos. And so he sent me this, and we got to talking from that time. And when the genocide started, we would stay in touch, and he would send me these messages. And I told him that we were hosting this event, and we would love to share images of the things that he was seeing. And I'm not going to show all the photos, but and so what he had said, that he wanted to, he would rather photograph the beautiful things in Gaza. And then 2 weeks later, he was killed on November 1st in Gaza by the cowardly Israelis. And so we have put together an exhibition called A Memorial in Fragments, which takes an archive of his work that was retrieved by his brother Mayed in Cairo. And he sent that to us, and our curator, Allah, has done this incredible job of paying tribute to Majd. So Majd, like many hundreds of thousands of martyrs, was a universe unto himself, a life full of multitudes, and whose absence leaves an immeasurable void. And this exhibition is very much a tribute, not just to Majd, but also to them. And in this exhibition, we kind of, are thinking about the afterlives of images as a witness, as documenting, basically the absence or the documenting life in Gaza before the genocide. And also we included interactions that he had with the community. So Samar Hasboun, whose work I showed you, and Majd would talk regularly, and he would send images of selfies of him and cats. And you know, this offered an escape, a moment of comfort in a world that had grown quite harsh. And so we've included some of these interactions and conversations. You can see to the left of this lady, screenshots of conversations that Majd had with several of us, with Ma'an, with Rita, with myself, with Summer, and you know, we retrieved a lot of his images. And these are, for example, sunsets, and you know, we you know, gesticulate about maybe how, you know, sunsets were a way for him to kind of transcend beyond Gaza, to be able to leave Gaza during a time when he couldn't. And so this is a presentation an exhibition that we put together, and we'll be doing some online talks. So you could stay tuned, and we'll be working on having some programming around Majd's work. I wanted to kind of leave you with this bit of text that was in the After the Last Sky, the book that I mentioned. And I think this really helps to kind of close, you know, the lecture, to kind of help reiterate the importance of amplifying Palestinian voices through the apartheid and the occupation. And I'll read this real quick. And Edward Said says in his introduction, in the book After the Last Sky, the multifaceted vision is essential to any representation of us. Stateless, dispossessed, decentered, we are frequently unable either to speak the truth of our experience or to make it heard. We do not usually control the images that represent us. We have been confined to spaces designed to reduce or stunt us, and we have often been distorted by pressures and powers that have been too much for us. And yeah, that's the end of my lecture. I have some housekeeping, but thank you for your time to listen to this. If you are interested to see more work by Palestinian photographers, we have a few events coming up in London. There's an event on Saturday, May 17th. It's called Slide Fest Suffer, where I will be hosting artists from Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Sudan, and Yemen, who will be bringing together compelling presentations from these regions. And it is brought to London through the help of the Safar Film Festival, which is an annual film festival that focuses on the Arab regions, by the Arab British Centre and Peckham 24. And then we'll be doing a Slide Fest Palestine in Birmingham at the Birmingham City University. So if you are in the Midlands or know people that are there, please share this with them. And this image is one of Majd's images. The money that is raised from selling this print goes to his family. And this is available again in the link that I will share with you in the chat in a second. The book Landing that I showed, work of Ma'an Hamad, is also available to ship from the UK, and there is a poster that comes with it, and this supports Ma'an's ongoing work. And there are other books from the Arab region as well, and that's my email and Instagram, so please feel free to get in touch. And if there are any opportunities that people in the audience have to platform or to you know, amplify these photographers, and if you need to be put in touch with them, please don't hesitate to write to them directly or to ask me for a connection, and I'd be happy to connect you with them. It's very important, especially now, to have their voices centered and discussed, and you know, have their work shown. With that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Mohammed. That was amazing. And I will take the liberty to mention that if there was a lot of information at the end, and if people want to a recap, or to just to feel free to approach with an email to TrAIN, and Melanie, Paul, or myself will be happy to forward those queries on to you, if that's okay, Mohammed.
Absolutely, and I've just sent the link. I don't know if people can see it on the chat for the Zoom, but the link to the resources.
It appears on mine. I think it's
Great.
And yeah, so that was incredible. Well beyond any. I had great expectations for this presentation, but it went well beyond my what I expected. I have to be honest. I expected the stereotypes. I was expecting the kind of bombed houses and victims, etc. Yeah, you blew me away with poetics and kind of resistance through poetics, which I thought was a very beautiful concept, and that really came through in your presentation. But
Lots
which
of humor as well.
yeah,
As well, we would where you wouldn't expect to see that, you know. Yeah,
so I thought it was a beautiful example of the power of poetics to resist, to witness, to be defiant, but also and as you kind of as the talk finished on remember as well, remembrance, the power of photography as doing all this in a very poetic way. So thank you very much, Mohammed. Um, I am going to read a few questions. I think we can we alternate, Paul? I'll read
of
one
course.
and you read the other. So and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing names. I'm already a very bad reader, and I'm even worse pronouncing names. So
Michael, before you do that, I've just seen
yes,
that Almiro has said that we can't see the chat, unfortunately.
okay.
So I wondered whether people have got access
Mm,
to the chat,
maybe I can. I don't think they. Maybe
whether
we don't.
Melanie can maybe see if you can, Melanie, if you can see if you can.
I will. I will.
It says everyone, so I think we should have it now.
I will. I will add the chat. Add a comment to the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't. I can't. Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't have a solution to that. But let me read, and we'll try to kind of sort this out in the
Mm,
background. Otherwise, please feel free to contact the
hmm.
TrAIN email. But Tasneen Al Sultan, she thanks you for the presentation, and she asks, how can we as viewers support the Palestinian photographers? And at the same time, where censorship is at its peak on social media, news, public spaces in most countries, how can the Palestinian photographers push past the expected captions and safe narratives? For example, the images that won the WPP photo last week. So, very good question.
Yeah, I think social media has, while there are lots of problems with suppression and censoring and making it difficult, it has been one of the avenues for photographers in Palestine to get the news out, and these images that we've seen being live streamed, during the genocide have been very, very important in helping people understand what's happening and to some extent shape-shifting the conversation around Palestine and getting a lot of people to kind of to learn the truth for themselves. So I think it's important to keep sharing Palestinian photographs, to also visual literacy, something that is super important. We've seen how the media has contorted words and headlines. So, Israelis are killed, but like Palestinians are unalived or whatever ridiculous, word gymnastics happen. And I think it's really important to, find context or to understand context around images and, to read captions, to reread captions to understand what is being said. And then, of course, amplifying their photographs, and also to kind of look for photographs, photographers or photo projects outside the kind of mainstream, and it's hard because there isn't like one repository for them, and that's something that we're trying to help these photographers, have access to, photo editors or alternative media to get their work out. But now everybody can share stories through photographs and projects through their stories, and it'd be great if people kind of took it upon themselves to say, this week I'm gonna share the work of Ma'an Hamad's work or whatever. So I think that's definitely one way to do it. And I think, something that we're working on at GPP, for example, is to help, visual literacy, and also help Palestinian photographers who may, not have the resources in Palestine, given that they're living under apartheid and in the Gaza occupation, to, be able to be fully versed on, caption writing, or how to kind of disseminate images. And that's why some of our help has gone beyond platforming them, but to rather linking them to people who've donated websites, or Dropbox, to be able to have their work online, and things like that. And we found with Mudge's exhibition that it was so important to have these images saved, on the cloud, but also in physical storage, so that Mudge's images and his legacy lives on, for example. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. How are archive, because photography involves the archival of even in a digital age, a lot of stuff. So how does that happen when the kind of basic kind of living conditions are so precarious?
Yeah, I think efforts are being made by people to, very kind of diligently screenshot images. I know many people have also complained that a lot of those have been lost. Either photographers have been killed in Gaza during the genocide, or in many cases, Meta has removed accounts of people without any kind of justification. And, a lot of those, if they hadn't been saved on secondary sources, they're gone. I know efforts are being made informally and through different kind of splinter networks, but definitely this is something that needs a lot more work, and for a concerted effort, and possibly academia or other kind of NGOs really have to work on a archive. I know there have been efforts like the Accountability Archive that have been saving or screenshotting pronouncements of genocide, and that's being used for court cases and things like that. But I think saving images that are coming out are as important, if not more.
Not only as witness images or kind of denunciation images, but as you very well showed, images of kind of resistance and resilience as well. Yeah. Shall I read the next question from Nella, or do you want to do it?
I was gonna, Michael, before you do that, can I just say, just as a response, give my response to the lecture, which is to say, really thank you, Mohamed, for a really powerful display of the quality of the work. As Michael said, it's not necessarily what you expect from the region. You showed that beautiful picture of Calandia, and I've been to Calandia, and I took part in the Calandia International, which was a kind of visual art biennial, and I had a similar kind of experience where I expected lots of doom and gloom and images of, and it was poetic, it was funny, with lots of work that was very subversive, very subtle, etc. One thing I was thinking about with photography, perhaps that may be different in terms of resistance related to visual artworks, is the fact that they are able to be disseminated in a much more kind of immaterial way, or a much more flexible way. I mean, there was a famous project called Picasso in Palestine, where a Palestinian artist arranged to have one Picasso artwork basically shipped to Palestine from Eindhoven, from the Van Abbe Museum. Charles Escher was organizing that project, or part of that project. And the amount of effort it took, no one would insure the work, couldn't find the spec. It was just, but the whole point of the project was to show something so ordinary, to showing one Picasso work with the bust of a woman. And how much it took, about a year or so, just to even organize that, right? Just showed you how extraordinary it is to even have any kind of artwork in that situation, and that's in Ramallah, not necessarily. That's not even in Gaza. So I wanted to just really reiterate, really, the comments in the chat, that this is such an important project, and the way that you the kind of range of work that you showed was really, really impressive, and definitely I think we would be wanting to, engage more with this and to help to disseminate some of this work. So thank you.
Yeah.
So Michael, you want to read the next? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll go. Thanks, Paul. But maybe Mohammed wants to respond to that before I carry on.
Respond.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. That's that the nature of a photograph means that it is definitely a lot more easy to kind of spread very quickly, and sometimes that's at a detriment too, because I think as I talked about context, sometimes you lose that, and I think there are some projects that really need time to kind of to go through and to kind of have, and I think. I'll let you read Nella's question, because I think what I'm about to say is a good cue in response to her question. So their question. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Nella Milik, former member, now associate member of TrAIN, she asks, what aesthetic methods would you identify from these images, which are common in employing the visibility of people, land, life, etc.? So Palestinians are asserted into the history. Or I think inserted, I don't know, as opposed to being its non-people, according to Said. I'm asking this because it is a bit overwhelming to see them online and all at once, and you must have seen them many times, so you can perhaps draw up a register of mutual categories that connect them in terms of color, frame, content, etc. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's something that I think about, and I feel like I don't know if there's any commonalities that are that connect them in terms of the more kind of superficial aspects in terms of color or frame, but I think definitely in terms of content, what I'm seeing is a move towards agency and a move towards pushing back against this victimization type of imagery that we've seen a lot until recently, when Palestinians are choosing to to show their defiance or kind of resistance in a more outward way. And humor is something else that I think this lust for life that they have is something that is being used a lot. I think archives is something that I've seen used a lot, because again, the assertion of us Palestinians as a people and their culture and their cultural practices is something that I see keeps coming up. Man's new work is definitely an example, a case in point of how he's using his grandfather's participation in the Liberation Army, and how many others are also engaging the archive. But yeah, I think that humor and this kind of defiance or this resistance is, I'd say those are the commonalities that I'm seeing in terms of content for sure. But less so in terms of there's no particular, color. People are using black and white. Some people are using color. Some people are using flash. So I think that there's a myriad approach there. But I think definitely in terms of the content, this reclaiming of the narrative and being more defiant and pushing back is something I'm seeing.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next question, if that's okay. Okay, Miranda McKee, she's also thanks you for the lecture, and mentions it was tremendous. And she asks, the spaces you and others that have been mentioned have created for dialogue and storytelling and solidarity serve as powerful forms of resistance, offering, as you point out, permission to narrate. Do you have any advice for others who are trying to create similar spaces?
Yeah, thanks, Miranda, for the question. Yes, one of the formats that we've been using quite effectively is something we call SlideFest. And so we've been doing these Life Fest Palestine events, and it is a fairly easy event to put up. It's very transportable. People can be zoomed in from all over the world. And it basically requires a venue and people to come together and see it live. I think it's important to have a physical space. I mean, an online version is also possible, but this is a format that I think we're very happy to help go to kind of be used or modeled in different places. And others can get in touch with me to see how we could do that. I'm actually talking to a few people who are asking for help to find ways to bring this. We always, of course, insist that artists, Palestinian artists whose work is being shown in these slide fests are given an honorarium. It's very important that their work is not to be shown for free. And and outside of those things, I think if you have the privilege or good fortune of being part of an organization or an academic institution, having those works being shown in classes that delve around Palestine to be able to provide context would be great. People can share. Online on their own social medias, as I responded to Tasneem, that it's easy to kind of make an Instagram post or a story or Twitter or what have you to say, here's a Palestinian photographer I just discovered. This is what their work is about. What do you think? So yeah, but this. But it's not easy, especially I thank you guys for giving us this space. When we first started trying to talk about Palestine in 2023, it was extremely difficult, near impossible, and I think things have shifted a bit, and we are now getting invitations to be able to talk about Palestine openly, and that's great. And I think it's a sign of things to come, and hopefully, this is a small step in a long path to liberation for Palestine, and for for the permission to narrate to have been granted. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, this statement or expression, permission to narrate. It's very concise and poetic. A very good choice of title for your lecture. I think it kind of encapsulated it. We have another question from Ileana, who I think you know.
Mm-hmm.
She says, thank you for this brilliant talk, Mohamed. I was so pleased to see After the Last Sky, which is a landmark book, although rarely acknowledged as such, as you mentioned yourself. One of my favorite aspects of the book is the presence of images that we might call everyday life. And I was struck by the almost overwhelming presence of these pictures beaming with life within the bodies of work you shared. I find that these types of images are so precious, especially in terms of how they bear witness to the lives lived and fully in the midst of such destruction and loss. Is there renewed interest by younger photographers towards exploring these areas? A move perhaps away from the more traditional militant images, many of which were anyhow produced by Westerners? And secondly, are you seeing efforts by Palestinian photographers to archiving this work? I'm thinking of other contexts of strife where there's been bottom-up efforts to preserve photographs produced during crisis, especially with the knowledge of potential loss.
Yeah, so to answer Eliana's first point, thank you for the kind words, Eliana. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I think about this, or I talk to Palestinian photographers, and many of them, find that doing photography work that's outside the kind of news and wire circuit is a bit of a luxury. One, because access and being kind of with the camera in Palestine is basically putting a target on your back. Even, I mean, news photographers have a very hard time off it, but, at least there is a guaranteed remuneration or employment that comes with that. So I think And I also think that, a lot of the kind of education around photography in Palestine has been around documenting the very present or the strife or the conflict related aspects of it. And I think this is why Tanya's work was important at the time that it was, that when it came out, Occupied Pleasures, because I think it really kind of put that back on the map. And I think, I don't know if there is a renewed interest, but there is definitely an interest in the everyday life kind of images, kind of existence is resistance. But it is challenging in many ways because, accessibility to gear. To give you an example, we've been trying to send cameras from Dubai to Palestine, to the West Bank, and it has been very difficult because the Israelis keep rejecting it and stealing it like they have the land. And so, unless somebody is going into Tel Aviv and able to find a way to get it, it's been really difficult. So, even things like this make it quite difficult for photographers outside the kind of news world to be able to. But, yet there's still many who kind of come out, and, I gave an example, gave examples of people, and there are many others that I haven't shared. But I think there's no one answer as such, but I think there are people who are looking at documenting everyday life and both people, places, and events, but not enough, or there could be a lot more, and a lot of that is dictated by the circumstances that they face. And to answer your second question, yeah, I alluded to that before. I don't know of any formal efforts to kind of consolidate archives, but it's important for sure. I've been looking for one, or I've been keeping my eyes and ears open, and we've been trying to support individual photographers to have backups in clouds and things like, and cloud services. But that could be something, I hope an organization who has the means or the resources to be able to do that, or even better, these efforts that you've talked about, whether it's Ukraine or other places, if they are able to kind of open that up to Palestinians or to kind of use the ecosystems that they built, would be fantastic.
Thank you. There's a few more questions if we can continue. Are you okay to continue, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are still trying to ask for the chat.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if they were able to fix that.
I was going to ask. I think now we are getting messages in the chat to everyone, and I hope everyone can access the latest. It's via Gulf Photo plus support Palestinian photographers. There's a link there. So if they're still not appearing, please mention it in the Q&A, and we'll try to resolve. But we'll be happy to forward any queries on to you, Mohamed, if that might be the case. And apologies for
No, not at all.
issues. So yeah, again, someone from UAL, the union email, is wondering ways to support from this end, and Mohamed, I see, is answering that question.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks, Mohamed. And Evander Kleins, I think I probably pronounce it wrong. It's not a question, it's more a comment, and she wants to thank you for a memorable lecture, and mentions that the photo of the sheep and the man in the car will remain with her forever, and was her favorite. Comments from Rahul Patel, who generously helped us disseminate this lecture and also produce the poster for it. So thank you very much, Rahul, for your support. So he mentions that this lecture is absolutely essential, just as there is difficulty of getting Picasso to Palestine. We at the University of the Arts London are constantly having to deal with the same. Anytime we propose a Palestinian artist lecture or teaching session, the first word used is prevent. We haven't had any such words in relation to this one, by the way, but Raoul continues. It is important to have this session online, but we would need to physically get spaces in the university as well. signed Rahul. Okay, thanks for that, Rahul. And then Rahul mentions, and maybe Melanie can share this. He mentions an exhibition by Malak Matar at Central St. Martin's, which will host. I think this information, if we could share this information, please, Melanie, in the chat to everyone, I think that would be very useful. And I'll just wait a little bit for that. Did you manage to answer that question, Mohammed?
Yes, I've been answering that and pasting the link to the file. I'm not sure if people are able to get it, but I've answered to people asking for that document.
Okay.
And of course,
So,
they can reach out to me or my Instagram, and maybe on my Instagram, I'll do a story and link to it so people can find it.
And again, we're happy to share any information. Oh, okay. So Melanie has shared that information posted by Raul on the chat to everyone. So I'm going to, if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to round up the lecture. Thanking Mohammed. It's been a great lecture, very informative, and I think beyond kind of expectations, really, in terms of the kind of stereotype of what we see in the news, etc. Very informative and something that is absolutely necessary, as Raul mentioned. We need more of these. So thanks very much, and yeah, and we'll be happy to pass on any further questions or requests for information to you.
So my pleasure. Thank you to everybody who's made time for this, and free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I just put in the chat a link, but I'm not sure if it got through to the project I mentioned, which is actually by an artist called Khalid Hourani, called The Castle in Palestine, just as a link for people to have a look at. But again, thank you so much, Mohammed. And yeah, it's such an important work. We appreciate that.
Thank you, and thank you for all the questions and comments, and for coming to the lecture, and keep an eye for more of our emails announcing future seminars, lectures, etc., and activities. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Michael.
you.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, TrAIN team. Thank you. Bye-bye.